You guys. Bill Reichert, who is representing the officer group and is the second vice president of the Wire Association, came down from Vermont for the ceremony and is back up tonight for dinner there. So thank you, Bill, for making this part of your schedule today. And obviously to Jonathan, to Georgie, thank you for coming to the office. It was, not too long ago that I met Peter. I'm so glad that I have a chance to be part of the winding with you this year. But for as many years as the association's been around, this is probably the most special of the traditions that we have. So thank you for continuing that. So I'll turn it to Bill, who has a few words, and then he'll turn it to you. And do that.
Okay, well, hello. Thank you all for being here. This, as Steve had just said, this is, I'm sure, many that he's been at, many that a lot of you have been at. This is my first one. I've been in the industry for a little while, but this is really kind of indicative in what you get in the wire industry. There's a lot of professionals, there's a lot of camaraderie, and there's a lot of history. But three things that I like to keep in mind with any event, work, situation is people, products, and process. And I think if you think about what this signifies with the clock, how it got here after World War II, and the reasons why with people doing things, and the support that was there, and the teamwork that was there, and the camaraderie that was there. So I'm very honored to be able to be here at my first event, Clockwinding event, as you think about that. And out of the 29 years in the industry for myself, the people you meet, the professionals you meet, the networking, and then the colleagues and the friendships that you get over the years. It's nice, it does a lot, and then you have an opportunity such as today to kind of think about where that all comes from, and think about the past, and think about some traditions and things like that. So, Jonathan, this is for you with your family. Welcome, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Would you like me to
yes.
a bit of winding? It's going to take a while. Here we go. Yeah. Coming up. I guess we'll know how far to go.
Nice.
We about that?
Yes.
Okay.
That's good.
Excellent. Done for another year.
Yes.
Put that one down there. Good. Well, I do have a few things to say. It's a long way to come just to stand here and wind a clock only. So if you don't mind, I'll say a few words. And I think obviously the first thing I need to do is thank the WI for the invitation as a starting point, because it's a ceremony that's gone on for many years, and as you know, our family is very much involved in it. And it's great to be invited, both Georgie and myself, to come over here for the event. I think you probably also know that it was my grandfather and the other leaders of the British wire industry who, after the Second World War, clubbed together to buy this clock and sent it over here as a thank you for all the help that the American wire industry gave the British wire industry during the Second World War. We're all wire people, we know wire's used in pretty much everything out there. And particularly in a war effort, wire is an absolutely essential component. And if you don't have a wire industry, it's really going to hammer your ability to fight a war. So I understand that the American wire industry sent over a huge amount of machinery. A lot of it is still at the bottom of the Atlantic, unfortunately. But it came over and it was used very successfully. And this was a way of saying thank you. I've also recently actually reading a bit of family history, and I found out, and I didn't know this, that in 1959 my grandfather was awarded the Mordecai Award, have I said that right? Mordecai Award from the WAI, and he was the first British national to be awarded that particular award. So that was interesting to know about. And that was for a particularly innovative product that he'd been working on. Many family members have also wound this clock. You know Peter Rigby, he's wound it on a couple of occasions, my grandfather. Paddy Rigby, who's given this golf club up there, and maybe even a couple more as well. And I think, I was speaking to somebody here, and they was telling me about my father's last speech, and how it was incredibly funny, and the wittiest thing they'd ever heard. So thanks for that, Father. I don't think I'm not going to try and compete on that particular one. I'll tell you a little bit about myself as well, because I think that's important. I come from a family where we've always been involved in the USA in some way. My grandfather travelled extensively over in America, building relationships within the industry. My father also lived and worked over here in Connecticut, up in Litchfield, not far from here. That's when I first lived over in the States. And then Georgie and I have also lived over in New Jersey for several years, working for the Handy and Harman Wire and Cable Group. I don't know if you're aware of those guys, for 3 years or so as well. Now, I'm back in the UK, and I'm working for a company called Fox Wire, who is a stainless steel wire manufacturer. They've got a bit of heritage. They're over 150 years old, so they're still going on. But whilst I'm here, why don't I give you a very brief overview, a little bit about what's going on in Europe. Maybe mainly from my perspective. Our company's main market is Europe as a whole. It's our home market. And I think it's safe to say that things are tough. Things have slightly recovered from when we all fell off the edge of the cliff, but not dramatically so. And there's still a lot of overcapacity in the European market. We get an awful lot of imports. So it's difficult. And we're all working incredibly hard. But I was at a meeting not long ago, not far from here actually, with a guy called Frank Cardile. I don't know if you know Frank Cardile. He runs the Interwire Group. Yeah. And he sat there and he said, he pointed to me, you have to excuse my American-Italian accent there. He said, Jonathan, he said, you guys have to work so much harder than when we did when I was your age. I sort of sat there and I thought, well, that's very good of you, Frank, to say so. And I thought, well, actually, I don't think that's necessarily the case, particularly knowing Frank. I can't imagine anybody working harder than Frank. I think the difference is that we're having to do things differently. And one of the things that we've noticed within my organisation particularly is we're having to re-energise the organisation through bringing in innovation. You can't live off the same products you have done all these years, because slowly but surely they'll get taken away from you. Now, Foxwire being 150 years old has its benefits. I think our average length of service at the moment is about 30 years. So that's quite some period of time. And what we're trying to do at the moment is bring in this feeling of innovation into the organisation to re-energise it. And I think we learnt fairly early on that it's not going to come from the senior management, it's going to come from the guys on the shop floor, and it's going to probably come from outside the organisation as well. So rather than go through all the individual innovations that are happening at my company, Foxwire, because I think it'll bore you to death, I'm going to talk a little bit about the kind of people who have inspired us on this path to innovation. And to do that, I really need to talk about two men. And the first one relates to the British Olympic cycling team. And I don't know if you remember, but we had the Olympics in London in 2012. And the British Olympic cycling team, specifically the velodrome, where you go around in circles indoors, we did rather well in. I'm sure everybody here knows how many gold medals we won. No, I guess that was never going to be an answer, was it? We actually, in Britain, won 7 gold medals, and the rest of the world won 3. And when you're not a cycling nation, that's quite an impressive thing to do. So the question is, how did we do it? And I think the secret was a guy called Matt Parker. And Matt Parker was given the task of trying to improve the cycling team in very small increments. And he did very strange things. He invented things called hot pants, where it kept the legs warm in between races. He also actually even put alcohol on the wheels. He used to rub alcohol on the wheels to take up the slightest bit of dirt before the race started, to give that extra little bit of grip, which would allow the British team to win. Basic things like good hygiene, good hand hygiene. When you're in an Olympic village with a whole load of foreign nationals, wash your hands all the time, because people are coming in from abroad, there's different germs, so you're not used to that kind of thing. And he also realised there was a thing called the golden hour, which was the hour between the semi-finals and the finals of the race. And what he used to believe is, if you can get your team to improve between then and now, then you'll really succeed. And in fact, the British team were the only team to go faster between the semi-finals and the finals. The whole rest of the world went slower. And those are because of the small, incremental, marginal gains that Matt Parker brought into the Olympic team. But marginal gain, the small incremental improvements, that's not the only part of innovation that we've been trying to get into the organisation. What about the big leap, the grand improvement? And for that, really, we had to look somewhere else. And to that, we had to look to a guy called Mario Capecchi. Now, Mario Capecchi was a scientist who lives in the USA. And 30 years ago, he applied for funding from an organisation called the National Institute for Health. Some of you may already be aware of this. It's a tax-funded organisation. And what he wanted to do was, he wanted to knock out a gene within a mouse and replace it with another gene. And this was really cutting-edge stuff at the time. No one had ever done it. And he went up to them and said, I really need funding for this. And they said, well, that's great, but in all honesty, we think you're a great scientist, a great researcher, but it's far too risky. Go away and do something else with the money. And what he did was he totally ignored them. And he simply set off in his own path. I think really what you've got to do to understand why he did that, because that's quite a risky thing to do, to take somebody's money and go do something totally different with it. You have to understand the kind of guy he was. And Mario Capecchi, he was born in Italy just after the war. And his earliest memories, by all accounts, are the Gestapo coming to his mother's door and taking his mother away. And watching her, and she went over to one of the concentration camps. So he was left alone, and he was passed around from family to family around the village. And he ended up with his father, which wasn't a good move because his father wasn't a particularly nice person. He ended up beating him, unfortunately. So Mario ran away and lived on the streets during the war for all the way through to the end. And remember, this is a kid who's 4.5 years old. And he went from orphanage to street gang, etc., etc., etc. And at the end of the war, lo and behold, he's lying in a hospital, and who should turn up to find him but his mother, who's been looking for over a year. And she took him to America. And the next thing I guess you need to know about Mario Capecchi is that he's now going to Harvard, because he's a very bright kid, and he gets to do that. So he goes to Harvard, and he wants to study molecular biology, which is obviously where the mouse gene comes from. And Harvard said, you better study here, you should study here, we're great here, etc. But he didn't want to, because he felt that it was all about marginal gain. There was no grand leap at all. And so he went over to the University of Utah, if I remember correctly. And he built up his own department. And he actually did knock the gene out of the mouse and put the fresh one in. And for that, he won the Nobel Prize. But the difference is here is there's a guy who's really stubborn, and he can actually make these grand leaps of innovation. But the bit what we don't necessarily have is, what if you're a shy innovator? You've got a great idea, but you're not like a Mario Capecchi. How are you going to do that? And in all honesty, most innovative people I see are like that, particularly in the wire industry. They don't shout about their abilities. So other organisations, I guess, around who do encourage that. And luckily, again, you have to turn to the United States for a good example of this. And that would be the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, which I don't know whether anybody here is aware of. It's a very well-run organisation, but they deliberately go out to fund the highest risk medical advancements they possibly can. And in fact, the board of the organisation there looks every year at the risk factor of the projects they've got on, if it goes any longer, and if they say it goes above 50%, then they say we're being too safe. We've got to bring further risky projects in. And that's great, because you can be shy and quiet and still be extremely innovative. So those are the two sort of areas that we're trying to bring into our organisation. And it's not easy, particularly if you've got 150 years of history and a long length of service. But the guys on the shop floor are being fantastic. They're the ones who are doing more of the incremental improvements, and they're heavily encouraged to do so. and to get a lot of the outside help, the ground steps. We're a small company. We can't employ metallurgists as far as the eye can see. So what we do is we work with academic institutions. We're very close to Sheffield University that specialises in the steel industry, as you'd expect. Very much the home of the stainless steel industry. And at the moment, as of a week ago, I now have 4 final year graduates working on specific projects for us, which will help hopefully bring in that strong grand leap innovation. And there's some really exciting projects within that. So look, that's all I've got to say. I was just simply trying to explain to you where we are and what we're trying to do. I'd like to thank DWMI once again for allowing me to stand up here and spout forth about my particular passion at the moment. It's very kind of you. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's okay.